The stench of disinfectant clung to the hospital corridor like a warning. My sneakers squeaked across the waxed floors as I pushed past startled nurses. All I could think of was my son, fighting for his life somewhere behind those doors. Nothing, no one, was going to stop me. When I burst into his room, the sight almost dropped me to my knees. My little boy lay there, swallowed by a hospital gown too big for his body, tiny arms covered in tubes feeding into beeping machines. His skin, usually so warm and full of life, was pale as paper. I reached for his hand. It was ice cold. Dennis was already there, still covered in the grit of his construction site. He grabbed my hand like a drowning man. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Thank God you're here, Vera." A doctor with kind eyes and thick glasses stepped forward. "Mrs. Fletcher, please sit down." "I don't want to sit down. Tell me what's wrong with my son." Her voice was calm but heavy. "He's been poisoned. We found traces of ethylene glycol in his system, antifreeze. It's not enough to be immediately fatal, but it's serious. We're treating him now." Poisoned. The word rang in my skull like a bell. This morning Colby was showing me his new T-Rex drawing and laughing at his dad's silly jokes. This morning he was healthy. This morning everything was fine. I gripped his tiny hand tighter. "When will he wake up?" "We've administered the antidote. He's responding well," the doctor said. Time stretched and warped as I sat by his bed, whispering promises of all the things we'd do when he got better. Dennis paced, making phone calls, to work, to the school, trying to piece together what had happened. Then, like a miracle, Colby's eyelids fluttered. His fingers curled weakly around mine. "Colby, baby, can you hear me?" His eyes opened, brown and beautiful, but filled with a fear I'd never seen before. He whispered, so quiet I had to lean in close. "Mom, it wasn't an accident." My heart stopped. "What wasn't an accident, sweetheart?" He looked past me to make sure no one else could hear. Dennis had stepped out to talk to another doctor. Colby tugged me closer with surprising strength. "Grandma gave me the juice," he said, every word clear despite his weakness. "She said it would make me strong. But it made me sick instead." The room spun. My stomach turned to lead. "Grandma? She said it was our secret," he murmured. Before I could even begin to process the horror, the door opened. Judith Fletcher walked in, my mother-in-law for 8 years, carrying a teddy bear and wearing her best mask of concern. Perfect as always, silver hair immaculately styled, makeup flawless. "Oh my goodness, how is he?" she gushed, rushing toward the bed. I came as soon as Dennis called. "I can't believe this happened." Colby's grip on my hand tightened so hard it hurt. His monitors beeped faster. "Get away," he said, voice stronger now. "Get away from me." Judith froze mid-step. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "It's Grandma. I brought you Mr. Buttons." She held up the teddy bear like a peace offering. "You poisoned me," Colby said, loud enough that the nurse at the station turned to look. "You put the bad stuff in my juice." Judith laughed, a sound too high, too forced. "Oh my goodness, he must be delirious from the medication. Poor thing. Kids say the silliest things when they're sick, don't they?" Her eyes, those cold, blue eyes that had always looked through me rather than at me, shifted to mine. "You know how children are, Vera. They get confused. They make things up." But something in her tone made my blood run cold. It wasn't concern. It was a warning. "Colby doesn't lie," I said, stepping between her and my son. "All children lie," she replied smoothly, smile fixed in place. "It's part of growing up. He probably ate something at school and doesn't want to get in trouble." That's when Colby said the words that sealed her fate. That's when Colby said the words that changed everything. "She told me not to tell you, Mom. She said you'd take me away from her if I did." Judith's face stiffened, the faint tremor in her hand betraying the calm mask she tried to maintain. I saw it then, the truth, raw and unfiltered, flash behind her carefully painted expression. Dennis walked in at that exact moment, holding a cup of coffee he didn't even realize was spilling over his hand. "What's going on?" Judith turned to him, quick as a fox cornered. "Oh, Dennis, thank goodness." Colby's confused, poor thing. He's saying the funniest things. "I think the medicine's making him delirious." Dennis looked at me. He knew my expression too well, because it wasn't confusion or panic anymore. It was rage, cold and absolute. "Dennis," I said, steadying my voice, "Colby says your mother gave him something to drink. Yesterday. Something she called special juice." His eyes flicked from me to his mother, and for a moment, silence stretched across the room like glass about to shatter. Judith didn't flinch. She even smiled. "Vera, this is ridiculous. Are you really suggesting I would hurt my grandson?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Colby's small voice broke the silence. "It tasted bad, Daddy." I told her, but she said real heroes have to be brave. The color drained from Dennis's face. "Mom, what did you do?" Judith's composure cracked then. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Dennis, don't be absurd. I've taken care of that boy more times than you two combined. Maybe if his mother wasn't always so distracted." "Enough," I snapped. My voice sliced through the room like a whip. "Get out." Judith opened her mouth to argue, but I stepped forward, and something in my eyes must have told her I meant it. She left, muttering something about ungrateful people, and I watched her go, my heart pounding with fury so sharp it made my hands tremble. But anger wasn't enough. Not this time. That night, when Colby finally fell asleep, I sat by his bed and stared at the machines keeping him alive. A mother's love is supposed to protect. I had failed once, I would not fail again. The next morning, while Dennis went to file a police report, I went home. Judith's home. The front door key was still on my ring. She'd insisted I keep it for emergencies. Fitting. Inside, her house smelled like lavender and lies. The polished furniture gleamed under the morning light. Every picture frame told a story of control, Judith in the center, her sons orbiting her like obedient moons. I walked straight to the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed quietly. On the second shelf sat a crystal pitcher of homemade juice, a faint pink tint catching the light. I didn't need to taste it to know. I opened the cabinet beneath the sink. There, behind cleaning sprays and dish soap, sat a half-empty bottle of antifreeze. The proof I needed. But I didn't call the police. Not yet. Judith had always been the kind of woman who thought she could outsmart everyone, who believed charm and social standing made her untouchable. Calling the police would end this too quickly. I wanted her to feel what I felt, the slow, creeping dread of watching everything you love rot from the inside. So, I played my part. I called her. "Judith," I said softly, "I'm sorry about yesterday. It's been a lot. I overreacted." There was a pause. Then that familiar, self-satisfied sigh. "I knew you'd come to your senses, dear. Emotions run high in a hospital. I forgive you." Of course she did. Because she thought she'd won. For weeks, I let her think so. I brought Colby home. I let her visit. I smiled. I thanked her for the flowers. But while she chatted about how children remember kindness, I was gathering evidence. The bottle. The tests. The receipts. The surveillance footage from the store where she'd bought the antifreeze. And finally, the recordings. Her voice, calm and self-righteous, confessing to a small dose, meant to teach Vera a lesson about responsibility. When I handed everything to the police, I didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. Satisfaction came later, sitting in the courtroom, as Judith walked in wearing her finest clothes, still trying to play the part of the misunderstood grandmother. When the prosecutor played the recording, her face finally cracked. The mask fell. She was found guilty of attempted murder. But revenge didn't end with her sentencing. No, revenge was quieter than that. It was the way I walked out of that courthouse with Colby's hand in mine, sunlight warm on our faces. It was knowing she'd spend the rest of her life alone, stripped of the power she worshipped. And it was the whisper I spoke into the wind as we left. "You taught me to be brave, Judith. Now you get to live with what bravery looks like." I thought the trial would be the end of it. But revenge doesn't just fade when the gavel drops, it lingers. It breathes. It changes you. For months after the verdict, people whispered behind my back. "Poor Vera," they said. "How could anyone survive that kind of betrayal?" But they didn't understand. I hadn't just survived. I'd evolved. Dennis tried to pick up the pieces of our life like nothing had happened. He painted Colby's room, bought new curtains, tried to erase every reminder of what his mother had done. But I could still feel her shadow in the corners of our home. Sometimes, when the lights flickered at night, I swore I could smell that faint lavender perfume she always wore. I didn't tell Dennis that. He was already carrying his own ghosts. His mother's arrest had broken him in a way I couldn't fix. The man who once built homes with his hands now flinched at every creak in the walls. And the distance between us grew wider with every silent dinner. But I didn't need Dennis anymore. Not for this part. Judith thought she could manipulate life like a chess game. What she didn't realize was that I had learned from her. Every move she made, every cruel word disguised as concern, every controlling gesture had been a lesson. And I was finally ready to use everything she'd taught me. She wasn't the only one who knew how to play dirty. After her sentencing, she was sent to a minimum security facility just outside of town. It wasn't much of a punishment, a clean cell, polite guards, even a garden where the good inmates were allowed to plant flowers. She had turned her imprisonment into a performance, charming the staff, playing the role of the misunderstood old lady. I visited her once. Not out of pity, but strategy. When she saw me walk in, her expression softened into that same fake sweetness. "Vera, my dear, you finally came." "I came," I said, sitting down, "to see how it feels to be powerless." She smiled faintly. "You always did like your dramatics. I suppose you think you've won." I leaned forward. "Oh, Judith, I didn't just win. I learned from the best. You taught me how to make people believe I'm harmless." Her smile faltered. I placed a small envelope on the table between us. Inside were photos, the house she'd lost, the charity foundation she'd built that I'd quietly dismantled through legal channels, and a letter from the Homeowners Association stating that her property was being sold to pay restitution. "You took my son's innocence," I said softly. "You wanted to teach me a lesson? Now I'm teaching you one. Everything you ever controlled is gone. Every legacy you built will carry my name instead of yours." She tried to grab the envelope, but her hands were trembling. "You can't." "I already did," I interrupted. "And here's the best part. I didn't need to break the law to do it. I just learned how to pull strings like you." For the first time, Judith didn't have a response. The silence between us was thick, like smoke after a fire that had finally burned out. When I stood to leave, she said something so quiet I almost missed it. "You've become me." I paused at the door, then turned back just long enough to say, "No, Judith." I became better. Outside the prison gates, the wind was sharp, cold, and honest. I closed my eyes and took a breath that tasted like freedom. Colby was waiting for me in the car with Dennis. My son's laughter filled the air when he saw me. That sound alone was more powerful than any revenge I could ever plan. As I buckled him in, he asked, "Mom, is Grandma still mad?" I looked into those brown eyes, the same ones that had seen too much for their age, and smiled. "No, sweetheart. She's just learning what happens when you hurt people who love you." We drove away, the past shrinking behind us like the faint echo of a nightmare. But deep down, I knew one truth would always remain: revenge doesn't heal. It doesn't erase. It transforms. It gives back the power that was stolen from you, piece by piece, until one day you can finally look at the ruins and say, "I survived because I refused to stay broken." And that was the sweetest justice of all.